Everybody, happy Tuesday. Took the day off yesterday. Was up late the night before and wound up getting freaking indigestion again. I ate way too much on Sunday. Went over to my brother's for dinner. And for some reason last night I couldn't sleep either. I get like a natural caffeine high when I start reading something really good and I'm hot on the trail of some new important discoveries. Such was the case last night. I got to stop reading before bed, but it seems it's the best time for me to do that. But every time I do, when I get into something good, I just get like, wow, you know, it's like an adrenaline rush. And I can't get to sleep. It's like I drank 15 cups of coffee. So I was up the whole night, so bear with me if I sound half out of it today. But, geez, putting together some really good stuff coming up. My God. Like I said, I wish I could read and type faster. I can't read and type fast enough to get these notes down. And, you know, and as I discover new stuff, more and more stuff is coming at me. And, like I said, I just can't keep up. It's crazy. Can't believe the stuff that's out there. Just when you think you've heard it all, keep digging. You haven't even scratched the surface yet. The adventure hasn't even begun. I remember thinking that years ago when I was back on friggin' RBN. I remember panicking and thinking, geez, how can I keep this going indefinitely? I seem to be running out of material, so I started booking guests. And in the meantime, you know, I was working on other outlines to do when I didn't have guests, but I honestly thought that I was going to be running out of topics eventually, you know, and maybe I might even run out of guests. No, that was back in my days of blissful ignorance. I hadn't even begun to investigate this frigged up world. It's never ending. But of course, it's never ending when it comes to any other topic I talk about. You know, science, there's so much fascinating stuff out there. Incredible discoveries that are being made every day, you know, about ancient history as well. And that's one of the things I'm working on right now, some really fascinating stuff regarding ancient history. I was doing some web searching yesterday and eBay, Amazon, found some great titles. I'm going to be ordering later today. Some other avenues of research I'm pursuing. It's amazing. What I found too, it's crazy how things work. I'll start reading one book, and then I'll discover another book that ties in with, you know, the one I've been reading, and you know, then I'll find a website or something that it just happens to fit in precisely with what I'm researching at the time. I can't tell you how many times that happens. You know, it's almost the case for some unseen supernatural hand guiding you. It's weird. It's really weird. How things just happen to, you know, fall into your lap all at once. Without even really looking, I'll just bump into something, you know. Oh, wow, how convenient, the timing of this. I happen to discover this now that I'm putting notes together on this subject. It's crazy. I'll be in a bookstore, I'll pick a book up, I'll just start randomly reading, you know, the title might look interesting, and I'll start reading a paragraph here or there, and son of a gun, look at that crap. I'll buy a book just because it has one fascinating paragraph in it, you know. Of course, upon taking it home, I'll discover there's more in there than that. But I've done that. I bought books just because it has one quote that's really good. I just have to get it. And, you know, it's tying in with something I'm working on. And then I bring it home and I realize, oh, wow, I can do, you know, several more shows based on several different chapters in this book. You know, it's great. It's great. You gotta love it. The information is just coming at me like crazy. So stay tuned. Lots more fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff. Just when you think you've heard it all. As much as I've researched, you know, the Jew book to expose it for what it is. I'll tell you, it's a bottomless pit. Another thing I'm working on right now is more fascinating ancient documents I wasn't aware of, showing the source material for much of what we call the Gospels today. Absolute plagiarism. I mean, word for word, verbatim. Stuff that preceded the Christian era by centuries. Well, of course, there's plagiarism in there from material that precedes Christianity by millennia. But I'm talking some recent discoveries I've made, verbatim quotes from, pagan sources. My God, can't wait to do those shows. But anyway, for today, I thought I'd cover this interesting topic. We'll cover some other stuff too. I'll finish this up probably the first half, but put these notes together a while back. Various religious organizations that have risen up over the years, you start looking at them under the microscope, and lo and behold, Jewish supremacist fingerprints all over those as well. They know. They've got a lot of experience at this stuff. They know that religion is a powerful tool to manipulate people. You want to control the population. It's not enough to get control of the banking system, the education system, the government itself, the military, on and on. You have to get control of religion if you really want to enslave people. You've got to get control of religion. But not everybody falls for the Jew book. That's why they created Islam and the Quran. But, there's not everybody who's going to fall for that either. So you got to have something tailored to everybody's interests. So they created, the friggin' UFO cult. So they get people distracted by that and manipulated by that. You name it. They got something for everybody. And so they know that one religion might not appeal to this group, but this one will, or this group tends to lean in that direction. So we'll create a religion for that crowd. And so over the years, they've created a multiplicity of religious organizations, all of them tending toward the same goal, to dumb down and dope up the masses and get them to eat out of their hand without even knowing who the hell's behind this whole operation. So let's take a look at this. Again, like every other avenue of our modern society, Jews dominate religious institutions, especially interfaith movements. In more modern times, this really took off in the 1940s, with the ecumenical movement. The Catholic Church started that whole thing. And again, it was an attempt by our little Jewish supremacist friends who run the frickin' Vatican, always have, created the goddamn thing. But it was, the ecumenical movement was created to bring Protestants back under their banner. The schism was created by them in the first place, the Protestant Reformation, as I pointed out in the past. John Calvin, a friggin' Jewish supremacist, if ever there was one. His real name was Cowan. Martin Luther pretending to be anti-Jew when in reality he was a major Jew ass kisser. Pretended to be anti-Jew to fool people, just like Winston Churchill pretended to be anti-Jew when in reality he was one of their biggest time lickers that ever walked the friggin' face of the earth. So, the Protestant Reformation served them well at the time because they were getting a lot of resistance from within the Catholic Church. And to some degree within the Protestant Church, too. So the idea was to create this schism, turn them against each other. Instead of the two groups uniting and turning against the real enemy, the Jewish supremacist pricks, they turned them against each other. Oh, yeah, and the dumbasses fell for it, as they always do. So anyway, that served them well at the time. But now, as the centuries have marched on, this division now isn't a good thing. Because, they got both sides kissing their ass now, for the most part. Most Protestants and most Catholics are majorly kissing Jew ass. So the tactic now is to unite them back together again. They get everything all watered down and milk toasted, and the ecumenical movement has done a good job at, as well as the World Council of Churches, National Council of Churches, blah blah blah. I've talked about this before, and it's worked for the most part. They've forgotten their doctrinal differences. They don't seem to matter to them anymore. So now they're ripe for the picking. Let's bring them all together now under one banner, because that's what the little Jew world order is all about. All come together as one happy little family, the universal brotherhood, the multicultural society. And so these different religious institutions are all about that. They want a hodgepodge, globally integrated mega church system that unites all churches and religions under one banner. Many of these organizations have focused specifically on, uniting not only Christians with other Christians, but Christianity and Judaism. Of course, ultimately, they want to get rid of all of it. Anything Gentile, they want to get rid of it. But initially, they want to unite it to bring about this global cohesion, the Jew world order. Once they get that, then they'll stamp everything out they don't like. And it's working quite well, isn't it? The majority of the Christian world, the Bible Belt especially, majorly kisses Jew ass. They lick, Israel's hind parts on a daily basis. John Hagee and, other scum like him, Pat Robertson, the whole 9 yards, leading the way. Mr. Olstein. What's that other piece of shit? I can't think of his name now. Benny Hinn. Yeah, that's the one. Who actually is a Jew. Leading the pack, getting the majority of the Christian world to kiss Israel's bare ass. So, this is very obvious even to the most casual observer who's paying attention. Unfortunately, they're in a very small minority. But nevertheless, let's take a look at some of these other religious organizations. Again, I've already mentioned the World Council of Churches, National Council of Churches, the ecumenical movement. But there's been quite a few others down through the years that they've created that most people aren't aware of. All the same bastards behind the scenes. These institutions, again, might differ slightly from the others just so that they will appeal to different splinter groups within Christianity that might reject all the other 999 organizations, but they'll accept this one because it's more in line with their thinking. It's friggin' unbelievable. Like I said, they got something for everyone, something that's tailored specifically to every different group, so that if they can't get you with, the other 999, they'll get you with that one. Either way, they'll get you aboard. There's always going to be a few stragglers that are suspicious of all of these institutions, but does it really matter if you accept the Jew book? As long as you're a Christian, they probably, they don't even care that there'll be a few that don't join ranks. As long as you believe in the Jew book, you believe that someday Jesus is going to raise up Israel again. So, you're already set up for a fall just for following the Jew book, mindless dupes. But anyway, let's take a look at some of these other organizations here. We have what's called the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Rah, rah, rah. Its director is Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein. This organization is a noteworthy exploitative scam, aren't they all? Rabbi Eckstein has sucked tens of millions of dollars from innocent Christians for brutal, racist Israel, a country that actually has contempt for these very Christians. You got to love it. If they were to go over there, they'd find themselves having very little rights, if any. They wouldn't be welcomed with open arms. They'd be frowned upon and, discriminated against. And yet, from a distance over here, they praise Israel and lick its ass. You just got to love it. Mindless. Frickin' idiots. Once again, folks, as long as you accept the Jew book, you're wide open for their manipulations. Just the fact that you accept it, you're being manipulated by them right there. Anyway, as its name implies, the International Fellowship of Jews and Christians, or Christians and Jews, it's international, having offices located around the world. Its original name was Holy Land Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Holy Land. Yeah, whatever. Its stated goal is, quote, to promote understanding and cooperation between Jews and Christians, and to build broad support for the state of Israel and other shared concerns. Unbelievable. Notice how they put that at the end. And to build broad support. Broad support for the state of Israel. That's the real purpose of the whole goddamn thing right there. Never mind the other bullshit. Promote understanding and cooperation between Jews and Christians. Oh, knock it off. It's like that pain in the ass aunt that you only hear from once a year. And she calls and bullshits you the first 10 minutes of the conversation. How you doing? I haven't talked to you in a long time. How's everything going? How's the kids? How's the wife? And after 10 minutes of that shit nauseating you, putting you to sleep, then she finally drops the bomb. Oh, by the way, I was wondering if I could borrow 50 grand from you. Everything else is window dressing bullshit. She really calls you to get some frickin' money from your ass, And so that's this mission statement here, To promote understanding and cooperation, blah, 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 blah. And to build broad support for Israel. Ah, frig, man. You gotta be shitting. Hey, at least they put it in there. They don't hide it. They come right out and tell you. Eventually, they do come out and tell you. That's what they're all about. Build broad support for Israel. You can even tell these mindless, spineless, mutton-chomping, dumbass, Bible-thumping sheep idiots how Israel murders Palestinians on a frickin' daily basis, bulldozes their homes, slams them into concentration camps, refugee camps. And then the next day they're building frickin' homes for Israelis on the same plot that was formerly owned by Palestinians. You can tell these mindless Bible-thumping drones what's really going on. You can even provide them documented proof. It doesn't matter. They're just going to look at you with this blank stare as though to say, huh? What's so what? What's the problem? They don't give a shit. They don't fucking care. And yet these are the people who will tell you that, we're filled with the love of Jesus, and we love our fellow man. We want to see everyone in heaven. The Palestinians can go to hell. The Israelis can kill them on a daily basis. But we love everybody and want them in heaven. Don't you just want to slam these people? I sure as hell do. Frickin' idiots. Don't give me your compassion for your fellow man bullshit when you support that tyrannical, mass-murdering piece of shit state called Israel. Don't give me your crap. Anyway, here's another one. The Center for Catholic Jewish Studies, located in St. Leo, Florida. Notice, Christians and Jews. They had the previous organization I just mentioned is for Christians and Jews, hoping to suck all Christians in. But just in case, they know that there's still some division with Catholics and Protestants. So now they got one specifically for Catholics and Jews. Christians and Jews, Catholics and Jews. Its director is Michael Cooper. Its stated goal is, quote, building mutual respect. Oh, and there's just so much to respect, isn't there? Building mutual respect, understanding, and appreciation among Jews, Catholics, and all people of goodwill. Yeah. They got lots of goodwill, don't they? I guess so. There probably is some truth to that. It'll be good if you will give them all your cash without complaining and speaking about anti-Semitic topics. Just willfully give them all your goods. Goodwill. Here's another one. The Center for Christian-Jewish Understanding. You know, the first one I mentioned, I don't know, it's probably got a liberal bent. You know, this one probably has a conservative bent, comprised mostly of Republicans. The other one's for the Democrats. You know, it's all window dressing to make you think that they're different organizations run by different people. It's all the same horse shit. The way I like to put it, different shades of shit all floating in the same toilet bowl. The director of this fraud institution is Rabbi Joseph Errol Kranz. Aaron Kranz. Notice, it's always a goddamnable tribesman. Isn't that funny? You don't see the Society for Fellowship of Jews and Christians, founded by, Billy Thompson or Johnny Joe Bateson or something. You know, it's never a Gentile that creates these goddamn things, ladies and gentlemen. It's always Jew. Sucker the Goyim. Anyway, the central office of this sleaze-ass organization is located at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. Sacred Heart University. Right at a Catholic goddamn school. You need any more proof who's running the show there? Come on. The center's mission statement reads as follows, as found on its website. It states, Jews and Christians have reached a dramatic crossroad in history. For the first time in 2 millennia, they have the opportunity to put aside their differences and seek reconciliation and understanding once and for all. Once and for all. Yeah, when you bastards were a little more alert centuries ago, you used to stand up to our tyranny. But thank heavens for Prozac and Fox News and CBS, on and on. Now we've got you stupid asses dumbed down to get rid of those old prejudices once and for all. Why, shit, we rip you off on a daily basis and you don't even realize we're doing it. We don't even have to change our names like we had to do in previous centuries. It's working so well, we can come right out and tell you who we are, and it can be seen for anybody who would have a friggin' neuron functioning between their ears that has access to the internet, who runs all of these major banking institutions that are ripping you off. Many of you dumbasses even complain about the banks ripping you off, and you can clearly see it's run by us, but you just don't get it. And even the few of you that do, most of them don't have a problem with it because you see us as the chosen ones. Our religious propaganda book has worked its way into your brains quite well. So we now can get rid of these prejudices once and for all. The mission statement continues, inspired by the Catholic Church's vision presented in the 1965 Vatican II document, Vatican II, which they frickin' created, Nostra Aetate, which repudiated historic Christian teachings of contempt toward Jews and positively asserted the ongoing validity and common spiritual heritage that Christians and Jews share. Make me friggin' gag. The Vatican II documents that repudiate, that refute the claims of Christians of past centuries that rejected Jews and Judaism. And who do you think created that? Who put that program together? Who drafted up those Vatican II documents? Gentiles? Send me the check, I'll mail you the bridge. Anyway, it goes on. The Center for Christian-Jewish Understanding of Sacred Heart University, Fairfield, Connecticut, draws together religious leaders, laity, scholars, theologians and educators to cultivate these new seeds of mutual respect and develop programs and publications to overcome deep-seated antagonisms that recent progress has not yet healed. Holy shit. Be right back. All right, welcome back, folks. I just got to read the last part of that mission statement again. It's so touching. In fact, I had to change my underwear during the break. We draw together religious leaders, laity, scholars, theologians, and educators to cultivate these new seeds of mutual respect and develop programs and publications to overcome deep-seated antagonisms that recent progress has not yet healed. There's still some antagonisms. You know, those annoying son of a bitches that we don't have on Prozac or Ritalin yet, that, you know, we haven't fooled with our controlled media yet, and haven't gotten them to forget the, you know, history. Those annoying bastards, we either got to kill them off or maybe let a couple more generations go by, dumbing them down more with our friggin' doped up education, you know, and hopefully eventually they'll forget about history and won't realize what son of a bitches we've always been. And hopefully we'll get everybody fooled so we can be one big happy family of Jew and Gentile, of elite served and dumbed down, doped up serving. The served and the serving. Is another one. Institute for Christian and Jewish Studies, Baltimore, Maryland. Lifetime trustees Leroy Hofberger and Melvin Sykes. Here's their mission statement. This is a charmer. Through our mission and active participation within our communities, we seek to, number one, re-examine the meaning of our religious assumptions, particularly about the other. Number two, challenge the theological distortions and misconceptions that have contributed to the historical conflict between Christians and Jews. Theological distortions and misconceptions. See, it was all a big mistake. You were all wrong about us. We're so wonderful, goddammit. It's not like we created banking institutions that are ripping you the frig off as individuals and entire nations. Of course not. It's not like we control your media and lie to you every day. Not like we fatten your politicians with big, fat, juicy wads of cash that we stole out of your pocket so they can pass legislation that favors us and screws you. Holy shit, man. Listen to this horse shit. Here's another one. That challenge... Oh, I think I just read that. Yeah, challenge theological... Yeah, okay, the third one I didn't read yet. Develop resources within our respective communities that inspire both Christians and Jews to honor the legitimacy and distinctiveness of the other. Wow, it must have pained them to the bone to actually refer to Christianity as legitimate. Well, it is legitimate to them. It's a legitimate deception tool. But, you know, in this context, to actually imply that, you know, Christianity is as legitimate as Judaism must have pained them. It's like saying Gentiles are just as human as Jews. It must have really pained them to have to say that. Anyway, I mean, you know, they're really one and the same, of course, but, you know, they created Christianity for Gentiles. So they hate it. Ultimately, they want to get rid of it. But they got to play this game for now until everything is in place to sucker the few that they don't have suckered in yet. Anyway, here's their goals. The ICJS addresses the contemporary challenges of religious pluralism by shaping a new relationship between Christians and Jews. Through careful and in-depth studies of sacred writings and traditions, we enable scholars, educators, clergy, seminarians, and lay people to, number one, disarm religious hatred by confronting religious sources of misunderstanding and developing new strategies to correct these distortions. New strategies to fool you, to attack people like Mel Gibson, who himself, unfortunately, is a dumbass, but nevertheless, who tries to say that Jews killed Jesus. We got to get rid of those distortions and misconceptions. The second one, promote understandings of other religious traditions, particularly of Islam, the third Abrahamic tradition. And then number three, create new educational models and public forums that explore the interplay of core religious beliefs, values, and practices within the public square. Again, notice all of this is all about the Jew agenda. Come together under one banner. Let us control you, dumbass goyim. Forget the past. Forget those silly notions that we were bad. Oh, no, no, no. No, 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 no. Notice how they speak very general, too. They don't talk about the horrible pogroms. They don't even want you to know about it. If you should find out, then they want you to think that it's just because they were prejudiced against us, just because we're Jewish. But they don't even want to draw attention to that. They're hoping that you don't even know about it because it's not in the mainstream textbooks anymore, of course. Anyway, so, they want you to ignore the past and also to ignore the present as well. Forget all the crimes of Judaism, forget their goal for friggin' world domination, destroying the economy, murdering Palestinians, lying us into, phony wars for Israel, on and on and on and on. Forget about all that. Let's just come together, learn to love us and embrace us as we screw you over, because we're God's chosen. We can do that. Just like Yahweh can do anything he wants. He can tell you not to kill, but he can kill, thousands of people with one bolt of lightning, or command you to kill, in which case you better damn well kill. Don't kill otherwise, but when he tells you to kill, you damn well better do it. You're going to hell. And so it is with his chosen ones. Now there goes the damn phone again. The same with his chosen ones. They can kill, and that's okay. As long as Yahweh says it's okay, yeah. Don't question what they do. They can do no wrong. Anyway, here's another one of their farce institutions. Center for Christian Jewish Learning, located at Boston College. Executive Director, Philip Cunningham. Associate Director, Rabbi Ruth Langer. And here's their mission statement, again, from their own website. The Center for Christian Jewish Learning at Boston College is dedicated to the growth of new and mutually enriching relationships between Christians and Jews. The center applies the scholarly resources of a Catholic university to the task of encouraging mutual knowledge between Christians and Jews at every level. Every level. Gonna make sure we deceive you at every turn so that no truth squeaks through. We're gonna plug up all the holes. Notice the last three words, though. Again, at every level. Encouraging mutual knowledge between Christians and Jews at every level. Unbelievable. To make sure our deception, our propaganda is complete. Here's another one. The J. Phillips Center for Jewish Christian Learning. Director, another Rabbi, Barry D. Citron. It's located on the campus of the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And here's its mission statement from its website. Kind of a lengthy one here. After many years of fostering Jewish-Christian relations, the J. Phillips Center expanded its mission to promote interfaith learning and friendship among people of various religions. It does this in a number of ways, primarily through undergraduate courses taught by the center's director and the occupant of the J. Phillips chair in the Jewish Studies, congregational and high school programs, retreats and workshops for clergy and religious educators, and artistic programs and lectures for the general public. We want to make sure we get everyone aboard. It's a public service, of course. By promoting interfaith learning, it says, and friendship, the J. Phillips Center is carrying out a mandate of the Vatican Council, Vatican II, of course. Again, a mandate that they frickin' drafted up. Let's forget the differences of the past. You guys were wrong. We were right. We were good. You were bad to us. But we're going to forgive you for all the naughty things you did to us. You nasty Hitler Holocaust supporters, you. We're going to forgive you for all that now. As long as you forget the idea that we're bad, we're only good. Not only did we screw you over in the past, we're continuing to screw you over now, but we got you so frickin' dumbed down, you're too stupid to realize that. No, we're your friends. It goes on, in subsequent official Roman Catholic teaching, and is thereby supporting the Catholic identity of its host universities. Oh, man. They're coming right out and telling you who's calling the shots, who's running the goddamn thing. So, you know, if you can't figure out they ran the Vatican all throughout its history, I hope the hell you realize they're running it now. Look what they're saying here. Of course, they run all the other goddamn cults, too. They always have. But anyway, since Vatican II, the importance of interfaith dialogue has been emphasized by many church leaders, especially Pope John Paul II. The 1965 Council document Nostra Aetate, which I mentioned a minute ago, from its opening Latin words meaning in our time, also known as the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions, calls upon Catholics to engage in dialogue and collaboration with followers of with followers of other religions. Jeez. Damn. Usually come in twos, not threes. Anyway, a couple more paragraphs of this bullshit. Nostra Aetate claims that the Church is, quote, ever aware of its duty to foster unity and clarity among individuals and even among nations. And it challenges Christians to, quote, acknowledge, preserve, and encourage the spiritual and moral truths found among non-Christians, while at the same time witnessing to their own faith and way of life. You know, if you believe in the Jew book, you can't argue that statement. To acknowledge truths in other religions, they're talking about Judaism. If you follow the Jew book, if you believe in the Jew book, you can't argue that. You have to agree that even if you are supposedly Jew-wise, again, how can you be if you're a Christian? But nevertheless, many Christians who claim to be Jew-wise, if you follow the Jew book, you can't argue that logic. Well, we don't like what the Jews do and have done, but their book is the truth. It is the Word of God. Once again, unless you reject all of what is Judaism, all of it, especially that damn Jew book, you have not woken up. You cannot genuinely take a stand against these bastards and their crimes. You can't say that you're alert, you're aware, that you're no longer in their clutches. You can't do it. You can't do it. That's all there is to it. Get yourself a yarmulke and check yourself in at the local synagogue. You might as well complete the process because you're 90% there, accepting that bargain book of bullshit. Anyway, The mission statement finishes up here by saying, remaining deeply committed to the enhancement of Jewish-Christian relations, the J. Phillips Center is now equally committed to its expanded mission of carrying out the wider interfaith mandate of Vatican II as an essential feature of Catholic identity, and therefore of the identity of its host institutions. And notice whenever you have a host, what do you have to go along with it? A parasite. Yes, yes, yes. But notice, it keeps making reference to Vatican II, Vatican II, so that dumbass Catholics will think that, this move is a Catholic move, a Gentile move. They're the bastards behind the whole Vatican thing. And here they are quoting it as though it's not Jewish. So if you don't accept our basis of unity, I hope you accept the basis that your own church has created for unity with Jews. Oh, they're crafty little slippery-ass bastards, aren't they? Anyway, as an indispensable means, it says, of strengthening the fabric of community. Communistic community. Here's another one. Institute for Jewish-Christian Understanding. Oh, Jewish-Christian relation, Jewish-Christian, orgies. Now we got Jewish-Christian understanding. The same shit, founded by the same shit, for the same shit purpose, but they just changed the names, that's all. Different location, slightly different name, but the same friggin' game, rigged by the same bastards. Anyway, this one's located on the campus of Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Ooh, they got them all over the goddamn place. Founding director, Frank Sherman, always a tribe member behind these things. In the wake of the release of Mel Gibson's film, again, The Passion, on DVD in 2004, this organization released this disgusting, butt-kissing response statement. Mel Gibson's film, The Passion of the Christ, has now been released in DVD and video format for private use. This occasions deep concern among us as people whose Christian faith commitments include love and respect for the Jewish tradition and a commitment to repent of the oppression inflicted on the Jewish people by previous generations of the Christians. Holy friggin' Christ. Can you believe this horse shit? Who is the oppressor, ladies and gentlemen? The oppression afflicted on the Jewish people by previous Christian generations. We acknowledge Mr. Gibson's repeated statements that he does not blame the Jews for Jesus' death. What an ass kisser. We also acknowledge that many who see the film are honestly unaware of the anti-Jewish elements. We feel bound by our knowledge and our faith, however, to alert our fellow Christians to the film's misrepresentations and insinuations. Cut the shit. Oh, they sound so endearing. Oh, our dearly beloved Christian friends, we excuse your ignorance. We know you don't understand the real truth, that we've never done anything wrong in history, and that we were victimized by your forefathers. We don't blame you for that. We just want to make sure that you don't get taken in by these truths of history and make sure that you believe our bullshit. What a bunch of vomit-inducing horse shit. Anyway, these organizations are not limited to just the U.S., of course. The same holds true around the world. For example, you've got the Chrétiens of Juifs I can't even pronounce this goddamn thing. It's in Belgium, anyway. Holy Christ. I won't even attempt that. Managing director is Menachem R. Messina. Well, what a coincidence! All of these, pro-Jew Christian relation groups are founded by Jews over in Europe too. Funny, Gentiles aren't seeking this kind of thing, aren't creating these kind of things. Just Jews for some strange reason. Here's another one: Center for Jewish Christian Relations at Cambridge University in England. Executive Director Edward Kessler. Need I tell you, that's a Jewish name too. The Elijah School for the Study of Wisdom in World Religions in Jerusalem. Director Rabbi Elon Goshen Gottstein. Here's another one: Interfaith Encounter Association, also in Jerusalem. Director Yehuda Stolov, excuse me. Anyway, here's another one: Coordinating Committee for Christian-Jewish Cooperation. This one is in Austria. Its director is Marcus Himmelbauer. Again, the Jew. Then you have the Interreligious Coordinating Council in Israel, located again in Jerusalem. Its director, Rabbi Ron Kronish. Then finally, you've got the Polish Council for Christians and Jews. Chairman Stanislaw Krajewski. It actually has the word Jew in there. Krajewski. Very interesting. Anyway. There truly are no end to the frickin' scams of these bastard folks. These bastards. This is only a small sampling. I just throw a couple random examples out there. Tossed a few out just to give you an idea. But these things are legion. They're all over this country. In fact, all over the friggin' world. All designed to manipulate the gullible religious followers of the Jew book into eating more out of their hand than they already are. Getting them to unite together. Oh, they love that. They'll quote a few Bible passages here and there. See, didn't Jesus talk about uniting and coming together and loving your enemy, loving your brother? You might consider us your enemy, but we're not. We never have been. You've been our enemy. You've mistreated us. So start applying those Christian principles now of brotherly love, and let's all get together. There's some real stupid-ass Gentiles out there, I got to tell you. Anyway, where to go next here? I pulled out a bunch of other... a bunch of other topics that I was planning on talking about. Yeah, I guess we'll do this one here next. Jesus, these notes are pretty long. I'm sure I won't finish this today. I'll carry this into tomorrow. The 1944 sedition trial, brought to you by your friends at the ADL. This is quite the friggin' fiasco. Actually, I take that back. It's 27 pages. Oh, geez. Did I say 24? Yeah, it's 27 pages. This will take a little while to go through, but this is very important. Something that has to be told. Most people are totally unaware of, of this thing. What the hell happened? What lies behind it? So here goes. In the post-9/11 era, we've seen major changes, of course, to our constitutional rights through such sleazy-ass frickin' Jewish neocon orchestrated pieces of crap legislation like the Patriot Act, which can and has been used to suppress our freedom of speech, for example. Anyway. Oh, I can't stop yawning. Sorry, folks. But anyways, what most people don't realize is the fact that this type of tyranny has gone on before in this country, and at the hand of the same cast of characters, our little Jewish supremacist friends. One of the most horrific examples of this occurred during the administration of FDR, the sedition trial of 1944, which criminalized criticism of FDR and his Jew policies. So let's have a look at how this whole thing freaking played out. Look at some background here first. The Great Sedition Trial of 1944 was a political show trial engineered by the American Jewish Committee, the ADL, and, of course, B'nai B'rith, in conjunction with the Justice Department and the FBI, the ADL's longtime bed buddy, with the purpose of imprisoning anti-communist patriots who opposed FDR and his schemes to bring the country into World War II and enslave it under socialism. The Smith Act of 1940 was used to prosecute the defendants. The case was designated as United States versus McWilliams. And we're going to pick up with that after the break, folks. Right back. All right, folks, welcome back. Anyway, the Smith Act, as I said before the break, of 1940 was used to prosecute the defendants. The case was designated as United States versus McWilliams, where the defendants were charged with conspiracy to aid in establishment of a national socialist form of government within the United States, i.e. Nazism, and attempting to demoralize the armed forces of the United States. A conviction carried a $10,000 fine, again, a lot of money back then, and 10 years imprisonment. That's interesting, isn't it? Because if you recall the goddamn Emergency Banking Relief Act of 1933, under that umbrella came a $10,000 fine and or a 10-year prison sentence if you were caught withholding any gold, if you didn't turn over your gold to the frickin' Jewish supremacist bitch bankers of the Federal Reserve. The same stiff penalty, the exact same penalty. $10,000 fine, 10-year prison sentence. Anyway, this sham incident dragged on for about 3 years, finally coming to an end on June 30th of 1947. It actually came to an unexpected halt on November 30th of 1944, having been declared a mistrial upon the death of the presiding judge. Anyway, yet the case continued to hang in limbo, with Justice Department prosecutors angling for a retrial. Then, on November 22nd of 1946, Judge Bolitha Laws of the U.S. District Court, the District of Columbia, dismissed the charges against the defendants, saying that to allow the case to continue would be, quote, a travesty of justice. It took that long to finally reach that conclusion. Although the Justice Department prosecutors appealed the dismissal, the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, the District of Columbia, upheld Judge Law's ruling. And as a consequence, the saga of the Great Sedition Trial at long last came to a complete close, as stated on June 30th of 47. But this end came only after years of harassment of the defendants and for some periods of imprisonment as well, for some of them. It amounted to one of the worst, most unconstitutional abuses of power in all of American history, thanks to our little Jewish supremacist friends. Speaking of this outrage of American justice, the Chicago Tribune stated, "Judges and lawyers alike will tell you the mass sedition trial of World War II will go down in legal history as one of the blackest marks on the record of American jurisprudence. In the legal world, none can recall a case where so many Americans were brought to trial, 30 in all, for political prosecution, and were so arrogantly denied the rights granted to American citizens under the Constitution." Again, ladies and gentlemen, all of this was brought to you by our little Jewish supremacist friends. Every time there's been a trampling of our rights, folks, they've been behind it. They're behind, wanting to trash the Second Amendment, the ones behind the hate crime laws, the Patriot Act, Homeland Security Act, John Warner Defense Authorization Act, on and on and on and on. All of it, all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. Every single time, a Bergenstein. The Bergstein here and the Steenberg there, here a Berg, there a Steen, everywhere a Steenberg. Oh, and we're on the funny farm. Anyway, let's look at how this whole friggin' thing began here. Initially, at least on the surface, it appears that our little Jewish president, FDR himself, had gotten the whole ball rolling. According to historian Ronald Radosh, what kind of name suppose that is, a self-styled progressive who wrote somewhat sympathetically of the pre-World War II ethics of the Roosevelt administration. He said FDR had prodded Attorney General Francis Biddle for months on end, asking him when he would indict the seditionists. That's from the book Commies, A Journey Through the Old Left, the New Left, and the Leftover Left, 2002. Biddle himself later pointed out that FDR, quote, was not much interested in the constitutional right to criticize the government in wartime. That's the time you got to criticize them the most, when they're lying your friggin' sorry asses into phony frickin' wars and draining your pockets dry to fund the damn things to our little Jewish supremacist bankers. That's the time you got to have the criticism the most, goddammit. But no, our little Jewish supremacist friends say otherwise. Anyway, as we'll see, there were powerful elite Jew swine balls at work behind the scenes prodding FDR. Of course, he's one himself, but all of our presidents really have those roots, don't they? But in any case, it's not them coming up with their policies. As sleazy as, Bush was, that dumbass couldn't even sign his own name properly, let alone come up with any policies. They were all handed to him on a silver platter. Just make an X on the dotted line, Mr. President. We know you can't sign your name. You're too goddamn fucking stupid, but just put a little X in. You do know what an X is, right, Mr. President? Yes, that's right. There you go. Thank you. Good boy. We'll give you a doggy biscuit later. Anyway, let's take a look at the victims of this outlandish Farragut fiasco, something right out of the goddamn Dark Ages. Although there was a grand total of 42 people and one newspaper indicted over the course of 3 separate indictments, beginning with the the first indictment, which was handed down on July 21st, 1942, the number of those who actually went on trial was 30, as stated, and several of them were severed from the trial as it proceeded. Roosevelt's biographer, James McGregor Burns, called the trial, quote, a grand rally of all the fanatic Roosevelt haters. Oh, please. Freaking break. He had to be a Jew himself. But there's much more to the story than that. In fact, there were a handful of influential figures among the indictees. Among them were noted German-American poet, essayist, and social critic George Sylvester Viereck, a well-known foreign publicist for the German government as far back as World War I. So it wasn't just average Joes on the street. There was former American diplomat and economist Lawrence Dennis, an informal behind-the-scenes advisor to some of the more prominent congressional critics of the Roosevelt administration. Then there was Mrs. Elizabeth Dilling of Chicago, an outspoken and highly articulate author and lecturer who was well regarded and widely known nationally as a leader of the anti-communist movement and a fierce opponent of FDR's administration. There was also Reverend Gerald Winrod of Kansas, with a national following and wide-ranging connections among Christian ministers and lay leaders, throughout the country. Winrod had emerged as quite a force to be reckoned with. In 1938, he ran a strong race for the U.S. Senate. One of Winrod's proteges was none other than evangelist Billy Graham, as it turns out, who was said to have, quote, learned much but kept quiet publicly about what he learned privately as a young man traveling with Winrod. That's an interesting observation there. Anyway, William Griffin was another one, a New York-based publisher with strong connections in the Roman Catholic Church. Many American Catholics at the time were strongly anti-communist, and Irish American Catholics in particular were generally skeptical of FDR's war policies at the time, when it will be remembered that the government of Ireland remained neutral in the war that was being waged against Germany by the United States and England, Ireland's traditional enemy. Anyway, most of the others who finally went to trial were little known and hardly influential on a national level. Those were the more well-known ones. But again, just to show, there were some prominent people among them, not just average citizens. Among these defendants were a sign painter who was 80% deaf. There was a Detroit factory worker, a waiter, a maid. So as you can see, they came from all walks of life that were victims of this damn thing. I think they did this on purpose, just to get the point across. This can affect you, too. We're going to take away your rights, too. If it can affect all different people from all walks of life, all different ages, different sexes, different racial groups. Anyway, in short, they were at best average Americans without the means, for the most part, or opportunity to be able to conduct the kind of seditious and internationally connected conspiracy that the government had charged them with. Nor were they in any way in a position to defend themselves, of course, against the unlimited resources of the central government. So they were easy targets. You're not going to be able to afford lawyers. We can rake them over the coals. It was all for propaganda purposes. That's all this was. Let's sprig up a few years of these people's lives. Who cares? If we can use it for propaganda, that's all that matters. In many cases, the defendants were actually quite poor, virtually penniless. In other words, again, easy targets for this exercise in tyrannical opposition silencing. Many of them were one-man publishers, reaching small audiences, hardly a threat to the mighty forces that controlled FDR's New Deal, or Jew Deal, of course, as it's been rightly called. Several defendants, as it turns out, were elderly, like I said, different age groups. A whole rainbow, across the board. Few of them even knew each other before the trial, despite the fact that the indictments charged them with being part of a grand conspiracy. They hadn't even met before. They even claimed that it was a conspiracy orchestrated by Adolf Hitler to undermine the morale of the American military during wartime. Unfrickin' believable. Who do you suppose could have been behind that? Well, again, we know who was behind it, but just looking at it from that basis, try to make the connection between these victims and frickin' Hitler, cut the shit. Anyway, speaking of how ridiculous the target choices were, the American diplomat and economist Lawrence Dennis, one of the affluent defenders that I mentioned a moment ago, later made this comment. He said, one of the most significant features of the trial was the utter insignificance of the defendants in relation to the great importance which the government sought to give to the trial by all sorts of publicity-seeking devices. In other words, they knew they had no case. So they used massive propaganda campaigns to deceive the American public into thinking that these people were, public enemy number one. Just for propaganda purposes. Nothing else. They knew eventually they were going to be having to let them go. They were just hoping that they could convince the American public that, this was a serious thing and to put them in fear that, oh, shit, I don't dare say anything. They're going to do this to me, too. I won't criticize our Jewish president. I won't even say he's Jewish. Later in this same book, A Trial on Trial, Dennis further stated that it was the design of the sedition trial to target not the big-name critics of the Roosevelt war policies. There were a few of them among them, but no, for the most part, it was instead, he said, to use the publicity surrounding the trial to frighten the vast numbers of potential grassroots critics of the intervention in the Eurasian War into, to silence them into oblivion, essentially showing them that, they too could end up in the same mess if they didn't keep their mouth shut. That's all it was. That's all it was. They knew that criticism of this bastard was warranted. They knew the whole thing was a fraud. Don't forget, the son of a bitch lied and said, just like Woodrow Wilson did, to get reelected in 1916. I won't let your sons and daughters fight in any foreign war. And then once elected, boom, there we were. As he was saying that, he was planning, or his buddies were planning, the friggin' Lusitania bullshit, the Zimmerman telegraphs. So the same here with FDR in 1940. He promised, I won't let your sons and daughters fight in any foreign war. And so, sure enough, after he was reelected, God damn it, along comes, Pearl Harbor, and boom, there you go. He was in touch with Churchill on a regular basis. British government documents show, telegraphing each other back and forth, trying to come up with a pretext to get us involved in the friggin' war. Christ almighty. So naturally, it was going to be criticism. That shit had leaked out. People knew what the hell, they knew they had been had. And so that's why you had the sedition trial. And why were Jews behind it? Well, because, number one, they're always behind this shit. They want to take away your rights anyway. But they were especially behind this, needed to be behind this, because these were the bastards that created the goddamn war and funded it. And their man, their fellow tribesman, was the one in office calling all the shots for them. Well, they were telling him what to do, but, it was being done under his auspice. So they had to silence criticism of him. And if they didn't do that, why, who knows? They might not have gotten away with their Holocaust bullshit. Anyway, here's how this same author put it. He said, the crackpots, so-called, or the agitators, are never intimidated by sedition trials. The blood of the martyr is the seed of the church, he said. The people who are intimidated by sedition trials are the people who have not enough courage or enough indiscretion ever to say or do anything that would get them involved in the sedition trial. And it is mainly for the purpose of intimidating these more prudent citizens that sedition trials are held. Again, it's not for the people themselves. It's already known that, they were brave enough in the first place to stand up. They don't care about going through this phony ordeal, It's intended for the general public, so they'll out of fear never think of taking a stand too. Unfrickin' believable. So again, let me remind you, this whole thing, just like the Nuremberg goddamn bullshit trials, all staged just to put people in fear and to make this thing look legitimate. So it was with this. All just propaganda. They ruined people's lives for 3 friggin' years. Over 3 dozen. This went on for over 3 frickin' years, and it was just for propaganda purposes. Anyway, the quote goes on. It is the weak, obscure, and indiscreet, he said, who are singled out by an astute politician for a legalized witch hunt. The political purpose of intimidating the more curious and respectable is best served in this country by picking for a trick indictment and a propaganda mass trial the most vulnerable rather than the most dangerous critics. Again, the most vulnerable because they can't defend themselves, can't afford to. The poorest rather than the richest. The lost, the least popular rather than the most popular. The least rather than the most important and influential. Again, vulnerable people. He goes on to say, this is the smart way to get at the more influential and the more dangerous. The latter see what is done to the less influential and less important, and they govern themselves accordingly. The chances of convicting the weaker are better than of convicting the stronger. So, kind of being a little bit redundant there, but, he makes his point and he makes it well. The whole thing was all a frickin' stage show. The Bush administration used this same tactic, of course, in the post 9/11 era. One Pennsylvania man in his 80s was visited at his home in Pennsylvania by a Secret Service agent for writing in his local paper, saying that, when Saddam Hussein was killed, he said he was quoted in the paper as saying, they got the wrong guy. You remember this story. So the Secret Service came to his door and You know, they were trying to imply that he meant Bush. They got the wrong guy, when in reality, he simply meant Osama, you know. Instead of Hussein, they should have captured bin Laden. That's all he meant. But they tried to twist it. Again, did they really think this guy was a threat in his 80s? Of course not. Did they think that he meant Bush in that comment? No, of course not. In the context, it was clear what he meant. Again, this is all goddamn intimidation. They wrecked that guy's day. Could potentially have given him a heart attack with the stress of having the Secret Service at your door, wondering, oh my God, am I going to get arrested? You know, it was all done just for the sake of the public, not for his sake. For the sake of the public. They used this guy as a tool to manipulate the public and put him in fear, not caring if he did in fact die of a heart attack. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. That's even better because that will put even more fear in the masses. Sick son of a bitches, man. Anyway, one of the 1944 sedition trial defendants, one of the weaker, less influential and less important, insignificant Americans targeted by FDR was Elmer Garner of Wichita, Kansas. This elderly American patriot died 3 weeks after the trial began. Senator William Langer, an angry critic of the trial, described this victim in a speech on the floor of the Senate. He said that he was, quote, a little old gentleman of 83, almost stone deaf, with 3 great-grandchildren. After he lost the mailing permit for his little weekly paper, he lived with his aged wife through small donations, keeping a goat and a few chickens and raising vegetables on his small home plot. They wrecked his goddamn life in his senior years, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure he died from the stress of all this. A short break. Anyway, let's continue with this quote here from this senator who was denouncing the whole friggin' trial, specifically what they did to this 83-year-old man. He went on to say, held in the jail, you know, in Washington, for several weeks for lack of bond fees, and finally impoverished by 3 indictments and forced trips and stays in Washington. He died alone in a Washington rooming house early in this trial with 40 cents in his pocket. You son of a bitches. The guy probably would have lived several more years, folks, but this was too much for him. It finally did him in. And you know what? They probably loved it. They loved it. They exulted in that. Wow, that's great. That'll really send a message of fear out now. Rotten son of a bitches. They killed him. They killed the fucking poor guy. Pardon my friggin' French. Anyway, he went on to say his body was stripped naked in a wooden box to his ailing, impoverished, was shipped in a box to his ailing, impoverished widow. His 2 suits and typewriter being held so that clothing had to be purchased for his funeral. Can you believe that shit? That is one of the dangerous men about whom we have been hearing so much, he said. And, oh, son of a bitch. I'm friggin' real, man. One of the reasons why, again, I have to say it, there's no justice in this world, ladies and gentlemen, unless you mete it out yourself. There is none. There never has been, and there never will be. Unless people grow a pair, stand up, and mete out justice, there never will be justice. Bastards like this get away with this kind of shit all the goddamn time. They should have been hung by their frickin' balls upside down until their face turned blue. Then feed their balls to them for lunch. before you shoot him in the friggin' head. According to attorney Henry Klein, an American Jew who actually defied the ADL by serving as defense counsel for another one of the defendants. He was a first cousin, actually, of FDR's first vice president, John Nance Garner. He died at his typewriter in a tiny room in a Washington flop house, typing out his defense. I wonder if they friggin' killed the guy. Anyway, so who were the real forces behind this evil fiasco? Well, we've already established that, but let's look at it in more detail. Besides FDR and his not-so-willing Attorney General Francis Biddle, who reluctantly followed the president's orders, as well as Assistant Attorney General William Power Maloney, handled the day-to-day details of the investigation that won the indictments before a federal grand jury in Washington. Behind the scenes, there were other forces at work, of course. The power brokers who dictated the overall grand design of the Roosevelt administration and its foreign and domestic policies. They were Jewish supremacist friends, of course. Lawrence Dennis, along with his co-author, Maximilian St. George, who was Dennis's counsel during the trial, concluded in a trial on trial, again, that same book, based on readily available evidence in the public record at the time, that the three prime movers behind the trial specifically were extreme leftist, organized Jewish groups and internationalists in general, all of whom were loud and persistent advocates of the trial, editorializing in favor of the investigation and indictments in their newspapers, and through media voices such as radio personality Walter Winchell, scumbag. Anyway, the book went on to say that of all three instigators, the Jewish groups were the most obvious instigators. What he didn't realize is that the leftists and the internationalists in general, as he put it, were themselves Jewish groups. But nevertheless, he did recognize that the most obnoxious were the ones who were outright in-your-face Jewish. Anyway, Dennis stated unequivocally, quote, one of the most important Jewish organizations behind the sedition trial was the B'nai B'rith, referring specifically to his to its creation, the ADL, Anti-Defamation League. Dennis further wrote, getting the federal government to stage such a trial, like getting America into the war, was a must on the agenda of the fighters against isolationism and anti-Semitism. What the people behind the trial wanted to have judicially certified to the world was that anti-Semitism is a Nazi idea, and that anyone holding this idea is a Nazi who is hereby violating the law, in this instance, by causing insubordination in the armed forces through his belief in or advocacy of this idea. So this was designed to prevent any type of idea of a coup. You know, if the military should wake up and realize what a fraud this whole damn thing is, that they were deceived, tricked into this war, if they were to discover the betrayal of Pearl Harbor, This was all designed, once again, to put fear in them so they wouldn't dare do it. Again, folks, you don't have to do shit like this unless you're up to no good. If what you're doing is above board, if what you're doing is decent, honest, legal, crisp and clean, you don't have to resort to shit like this. You don't have to intimidate people. You don't have to arrest them for protesting you. Let them protest. If what you're doing is right, they'll be seen for the fools that they are, and nobody will listen to them. When you have to silence people, need I even say this? Obviously, what you're up to is no goddamn good. You got something to hide. Just like their hate crimes bullshit. Obviously, they got something to hide. Obviously, the perpetrators of the hate crimes are the ones in the right. Or you wouldn't have to pass laws and arrest people for simply opening their mouth. Are you fucking kidding me? Again, it's the Dark Ages all over again, folks. Burn the heretics and burn their books, too. Prevent the dissemination of truth from getting out, lest we be exposed with our shenanigans. You believe this shit has gone on in our country? Well, stick around. It's coming back, ladies and gentlemen, with a bigger fury than ever, unless we wake the hell up and bring justice about ourselves. Otherwise, it ain't gonna happen. You got some friends in the military? Give them a call. This was not just Dennis's conclusion by any means, of course. One of the other defendants, David Baxter, later pointed out that a United Press report published in 1943 had made these comments, and I quote here, "Under pressure from Jewish organizations to judge from articles appearing in publications put out by Jews for Jews, the indictment was drawn to include criticism of Jews as sedition." Unbelievable. So it wasn't just sedition to criticize the government, to criticize FDR. It was sedition to criticize goddamn Jews. Holy shit. Can you believe the brazen audacity of these son of a bitches? He went on to say, it appeared that a main purpose of the whole procedure, along with outlawing unfavorable comments on the administration, was to set a legal precedent of judicial interpretations and severe penalties which would serve to exempt Jews in America from all public mention, except praise, of course, in contrast to the traditional American viewpoint, which holds that all who take part in public affairs must be ready to accept full, free, public discussion, either pro or con. In other words, freedom of goddamn speech. All this was designed to do was silence any voice of opposition, any voice of frickin' reason, any voice of truth, to silence them. They're doing the same thing as we speak, seeking to do the same thing, and probably will succeed, because America is so friggin' stupid with their heads up their ass. Doing the same thing as we speak, folks. Pushing the same thing through with their bullshit hate crimes legislation. The same goddamn thing, just a different name, that's all. Baxter himself determined in later years that certain Jewish groups, specifically the ADL, had been prime movers behind the Justice Department investigation that resulted in the indictments of the defendants in this trial. He finally had come to that conclusion. How can you not? Anybody who, diligently has done their homework and looked at this, you bump into this bullshit at every turn. ADL, everywhere you look, fingerprints all the hell over it, right from the beginning and all the way through. According to Baxter, commenting many years later, he said, I demanded through the Freedom of Information Act that the FBI turn over to me its investigation records of my activities during the early 1940s, heading up to the sedition trial. I learned that the investigation had extended over several years and concerned hundreds of pages. The FBI blocked out the names of those who had given information about me, much of it as false as anything could be. I was never given a chance to face these people and make them prove their accusations, yet everything they said went into the investigation records. This is just, again, exactly like the goddamn friggin' Dark Ages, folks. This is right out of the Libro Nero, the Inquisitor's Handbook, right out of the Inquisition days. The Inquisition Handbook states that, and this was the policy, you were never allowed to know who your accusers were. You weren't even told what the charges were. You were just told to confess. Holy friggin' Christ. It's the same shit. And no wonder. It comes from the same people, ladies and gentlemen. Torquemada, a lot of your big inquisitors were frickin' Jews themselves. They were the ones who created this sleazy-ass bitch of a system back then, and they created this thing now, in more recent decades, the sedition trial. The same friggin' people. That's why it's the same policy. Don't be surprised. History does repeat because the same bastards who manipulate history are behind all this bullshit every time. They don't just manipulate history, they manipulate the history books. So you don't realize these connections. Oddly enough, in a great many cases, he says, it wasn't the FBI that conducted the investigation, but the ADL, with the FBI merely receiving the reports of the ADL investigators. So there you go. That's why the FBI blacked out the names, ladies and gentlemen. Those names were Jew names, big Jew names in the ADL. When this guy did the FOIA request and got all these blacked out pages, that's why. He went on to say, one can hardly tell from the reports whether a given person was an FBI or an ADL agent. But at the time, all this was so hush-hush that I didn't even suspect the web spinning going on around me. I hadn't considered myself that important. I'm frickin' real. He did finally figure it out, though. Anyway, commenting on how the FBI had been used by the ADL in this atrocity, Dennis went on to say, the FBI, like the atomic bomb and so many other useful and dangerous tools, is an instrument around the use of which new safeguards against abuse by unscrupulous interests must soon be created. Writing it in his 1999 book, Montana's Lost Cause, a study of Senator Burton Wheeler and other members of Montana's congressional delegation who opposed the Roosevelt administration's war in Europe. Historian Roger Roots pointed out another fascinating cog in the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that led to the sedition trial. Here's what he wrote. He said, the Jewish-owned Washington Post assisted in the detective work of the Justice Department from the very beginning. Dillard Stokes, the Post columnist who was most conspicuous in his insider reporting of the sedition grand jury proceedings, actually became part of the Justice Department's case against the isolationists when he wrote requests to numerous of the defendants to send their literature to him under an assumed name. It was this that allowed defendants to be brought from the furthest reaches of the country into the jurisdiction of the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. It was done through that means. Can you frickin' believe that? Deceiving people. It reminds me of, years ago when I first wrote my initial paper on the Trinity, and I shared it with this senior student that sounded really interested. Oh, yeah, I want to read it. Oh, yeah. So much so was he anxious to read it, or so he claimed. He showed up at my apartment later that day, knocks on my door. Hey, you got that paper you told me about? I'm like, wow, you really are anxious to read this, huh? Oh, yeah, I can't wait. So I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is cool. I wanted his opinion on it. I wanted to get his, he had several years ahead of me in school, and so I valued his opinion, The next day, I get called into the head of the department's office. I told this story before, but it just reminds me of this bullshit I was reading, the same type of thing. He says, yeah, you busy this afternoon? Stop by my office. I says, oh, okay, great. I walk in, and there's my friggin' paper on his desk. The bastard I gave it to never read it. He never even looked at it. No sooner do I give it to him, he went over to the friggin' guy's house that night and handed it to him directly at his house. Couldn't wait to turn me in so he could get some frickin' brownie points, Unfrickin' believable. The same horseshit going on here. Rotten, filthy bastards. Anyway, let's look at the charges here. David Baxter thusly elaborated on the role played by Stokes, who used the pseudonym Jefferson Bream in order to obtain some of the allegedly seditious literature that had been published by some of the defendants, all freaking bullshit, just a big setup. He wrote, in order to try us in Washington as a group, it was necessary to establish that a crime had actually been committed in the District of Columbia, thus giving jurisdiction to the federal courts there. So the grand jury, which was obviously controlled by the prosecutor, charged us with the crime of sedition and then established District of Columbia jurisdiction to try us on the grounds that a District of Columbia resident, Jefferson Bream, had received the allegedly seditious literature. Thus was the alleged crime committed in the Capitol. The defendants were charged with having conspired in the District of Columbia, despite the fact that I had never been in Washington my entire life until ordered there by the grand jury. They freaking set them up so that they could say, oh, see, you committed this seditious act right here in Washington. Now we have jurisdiction over you. Again, right out of the Dark Ages, folks. This thing is as sleazy, as totally illegal, as corrupt as you can friggin' get. Did you know this shit went on in this country? Decades ago. Friggin' 60 years ago. What a classic Jewish supremacist tactic. Kirkpatrick Dilling, the son of one of the more prominent defendants, Elizabeth Dilling, pointed out in a letter to the Barnes Review publisher, Willis Cardo, that, quote, my mother was indicted with many others, most of whom she had never had any contact with whatsoever. For example, some of such co-indictees were members of the German-American Bund. My mother said that they were included to give the case a, quote, sauerkraut flavor. We've got to get some Germans in there so we can demonize them, get that anti-Nazi thing going. Later, during the trial itself, the aforementioned Senator Langer criticized this fiasco as, quote, the idea of bringing together for one trial in Washington 30 people who never saw each other, who never wrote to each other, some of whom did not know that the others existed, with some of them allegedly insane, and the majority of them unable to hire a lawyer. Notice, some of them were actually, literally insane. Probably pulled them right out of a frickin' asylum so that they couldn't say anything competent in their defense. Holy freaking Christ, man. This makes me think of the Miami 7. Remember that bullshit back in, when the hell was that? 2003, 2004? Even Geraldo Rivera, of course, this is probably all staged for public show, but nevertheless, even Geraldo Rivera had to laugh. The FBI arrested this group of Miami 7, they called themselves. It was 7, half-retarded frickin' Arabs led by a guy who walked around with a friggin' shepherd's crook and a robe, a long beard. He called himself Moses, for Christ's sakes. And, he had this little mini cult following. Anyway, the FBI arrested them because they were planning supposedly a full ground assault. They were going to, bomb the Sears Tower in Chicago. Rivera, went down there and took a look at the whole case and looked at these people, met with them, and he said, this is absolutely phenomenally ridiculous. These people don't even know where their local Sears department store is, and they're supposedly going to go to Chicago and blow up the Sears. He says, this is nuts. He actually even went on to say, basically, that the FBI set this up, to make it look good that they're doing their job and catching terrorists, that they staged the whole thing. He says they probably paid this guy, the leader, Moses, they probably paid this guy some money to say that he was a terrorist, that he was planning to blow up the Sears Tower, just, again, so they would have get some good PR out of it. He actually said that. Again, it's probably bullshit. So you would trust Fox News and think that Geraldo is a true investigative journalist. But nevertheless, the whole thing was bullshit. Miami 7, my ass. And so the same thing here, ladies and gentlemen. They were just setting this whole thing up, creating criminals where there weren't any. Kind of like what they do with entrapment today. The same bargain bullshit. And you think you live in the land of the free? You kidding me? You're free to be screwed. There's your freedom. The quote goes on, and remember, the defendants were brought to Washington from California and Illinois and other states a long way from Washington, placed in one room and all tried at the same time, with the 29 sitting idly by while the testimony against one of them may go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. The testimony of a man or woman whom the other defendants, again, never saw before in their lives. That is what is taking place in Washington here today. Absolute horseshit. All right, guys. Tomorrow. Great day. All right, everybody. Happy Thursday. At the end of another week here, just about. Going to finish up with what we were talking about yesterday really quick here. Just another page or so, not even, on this friggin' pharisaical 1944 sedition trial. A frickin' scam. What a fiasco, man. Look what the lengths your government will go to screw you up, but won't lift a damn friggin' finger to help you out, and all on behalf of their so-called Semitic masters. Anyway, I left off talking about this roguey bastard heading up the whole thing. They got rid of the previous attorney general there, and appointed this guy to head it up. He was even more sleazy than the first one. And even though Roosevelt died and the war had ended, he was still pursuing it. Oh, he said, since Germany fell, we'll have access now to all their records, and now we can, make a connection between these people and the Nazis, and say that there was a collaboration going on. Unfriggin' believable. Just like his Jewish supremacist masters, they don't give up. They're friggin' relentless. They will never stop unless a stop is put to them. Anyway, he launched a nationwide lecture tour that was, not surprisingly, conducted under the auspices of B'nai B'rith. Went around the nation trying to revive this case, trying to get people aboard with him. Prodded by his sponsors, he could not contain himself in his enthusiastic recounting of the events of the trial and of the personalities involved, and in the end was fired by the Justice Department on October 25th, 1946, for leaking information to the press. What a rotten, sleazy bastard. At that time, he was ordered to hand over all Justice Department and FBI documents in his possession. There were some people in our government that had scruples back then, had decency, had common sense. The Justice Department had apparently decided that he overlived his usefulness. Less than a month later, District Judge Bolitha Laws dismissed the charges altogether, declaring that the defendants had not received a speedy trial as guaranteed by the Constitution. Finally dropped the whole goddamn sedition trial bullshit. Anyway, although the Justice Department appealed, the dismissal was upheld on June 30th, 1947, by U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The great sedition trial finally had come to a close. As ridiculous and disgraceful as it was, though, was nothing in comparison to what was later to follow. The goddamn Nuremberg trial fiasco shortly thereafter. These monstrous criminal bastards have absolutely no conscience, no soul, no humanity whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen. They'll sink to the lowest of lows and try to get you to sink to the lowest of lows with them. And unfortunately, their tactics, for the most part, have worked with most people through history. I'm working on a show right now dealing with the end of the Bronze Age. It's going to be pretty lengthy. There's a lot of factors that played in with this, but clearly our little Jewish supremacist friends had their fingers in that pie deeply. Mainstream academia is in a tailspin, trying to figure out what exactly it was that brought the Bronze Age to an end so suddenly, and who was responsible for all of these cities having been ransacked and burned to the ground. If you read their official publications, it's pretty astonishing. They're either incredibly stupid or they're covering up. Probably a little bit of both. Probably more the latter, covering up. But some of them really do appear to be completely oblivious. Nevertheless, you read their works and they drop enough hints, knowingly or unknowingly, where you can clearly see, who the string pullers were behind the scenes. I can't wait to present this material, though, because it's just another important piece of the puzzle showing their infiltration and their subordination of the Goyim to their whims down through the centuries. An ancient version of, free trade, multiculturalism, diluting and deluding society after society in the ancient world, very much the same way they're doing it today. An international trade monopoly had been secured by them, and they sabotaged every country that they sucked into this black hole. Exactly what they're doing today. And that international trade was international. It involved the Americas as well. Anyway, save that for a future show. I'm only now starting to, I've been doing the research on it, just now starting to put some notes together. This is going to be a whopper. Can't wait to finish this. Anyway, that concludes our discussion on the friggin' sedition trial there. Let's see where to go next. I got a couple different directions to go. I'm not sure. Yeah, why don't we do this one here? I put some notes together a while back on Mr. Theodore Herzl. Pretty interesting. Found out a few things about him in the course of putting these notes together, and I wasn't previously aware of. As much of a piece of shit as he was, the founder of modern Zionism. His fellow tribesmen actually turned on him in the end, even though he helped advance their cause significantly. He was willing to make some compromises that the rest of his chosen ones weren't willing to make. And so now, whereas previously he was their poster board, hero, their spokesperson, now he became, a liability instead of an asset. So they offed him, interestingly enough. Not that he's worthy of our sympathies. He belongs in eternal hell, if there was such a thing, along with the rest of his game-rigging son of a bitches. But nevertheless, pretty interesting to see how these swine balls even turn on their own, if they don't do exactly as they're told. So let's take a look at this monkey and his story here. Born May 2nd, 1860, died July 3rd, 1904. He was actually born Benjamin Zioff Herzl. Later changed his name to Theodore. Anyway, he was an Ashkenazi Austro-Hungarian journalist, and is considered the father of modern political Zionism, and in effect, the father of the modern state of Israel. As sleazy as he was, however, there were even sleazier and more powerful elite Jew swine behind his operations, as we'll see. Some of these forces Herzl himself wasn't even aware of, apparently. But we find that just after his first Zionist Congress in 1897, he wrote, and I quote, "There rose before our eyes a Russian Jewry, the strength of which we had not even suspected." So there were forces within his tribe that, he wasn't even aware of, powerful forces that, apparently he thought he was in charge, but he was being guided and directed by unseen forces that far outweighed his power and influence. And again, as I said, and as we'll see, they ultimately took him out. The real founder of modern Zionism, as it turns out, was the Russian Jew Leon Pinsker, who in 1882 had talked about the importance of exerting irresistible pressure upon the international politics of the present, his own words, to advance the Zionist agenda, i.e. establishing the State of Israel and ultimately take full control of the world. But those are interesting words. Let me read those again. He said that they need to exercise irresistible pressure upon the international politics of the present. Irresistible pressure. And, of course, one of the ways they did that was through the creation of World War I. Not only to get rid of Germany, which it didn't do it right away, but it set the pace for it, put them into debt with the reparation payments. Not only to get rid of Germany, a major economic competitor, an economic threat to their global domination scheme, but also to enslave the nations of Europe and the United States into unsurmountable perpetual debt, so that they could, in fact, exert this irresistible pressure upon them, to support their cause, i.e., creation of the God-damnable State of Israel. Anyway, let's take a closer look at Mr. Herzl in the early modern Zionist movement that he helped advance. Herzl began a triumphal tour of the great capitals of Europe early on. Emperors, potentates, and statesmen received him as the official spokesman of Jewry. Everywhere he went, he offered domestic peace if assistance was won for the cause of establishing the State of Israel, but threatened revolution if assistance was not won. That was his mission as he went around, as he went about. And the leaders he talked with knew he was capable of carrying through with his threats. He knew they ran their central banks. They had just created most of them across Europe in the previous century, all during the 19th century. Friggin' central banks were popping up all over the damn place. One after another, after another, after another. In fact, now that we're on that subject, let me see if I can find it. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it is interesting to go over this list. Where the hell is it? By the time I find it, I'm going to be wasting too much time here. Let's see. Son of a gun. All right, I think it's here. I'm trying to remember where I put it. I actually got a list of the countries with the corresponding dates. Here it is. Here it is. There it is. Good, good. Yeah, check this out. Of course, the first central bank in modern times established by these pricks was the Bank of England, 1694. Shortly after they got their foot back in the door, having been kicked the hell out of there for centuries prior to that time, beginning in 1290. For over 3 centuries, they weren't allowed, rightly so, into the country. But no sooner did they get their foot back in the door through the little puppet Cromwell, there they were setting up the first of many central banks in Europe. So they got that one in place. It took them a while to really get the full stranglehold on the British economy that it was intended to get. Oh, they made some great progress right from the word go, but they needed to get control of, through the control of the Bank of England, get control of other governments across Europe so that they would be able to set up central banks there. Took them a while to do it. Sure enough, by the beginning of the 19th century, just a little over 200 years later, Well, actually, a little over 100 years later, 1694 to 1800, which is when the next bank was created. So it didn't take them that long. The first one was in France, a Rothschild creation, in the year 1800. In 1830, Denmark. Excuse me, 1813, Denmark. 1814, the next year, the Netherlands. I'm surprised they didn't get that established sooner. They had a strong foothold there, all during the Middle Ages. Amsterdam, baby. But anyway, that's where they ran piracy operations in the Mediterranean. They were run from there financially. Physically, they were run out of Morocco, where they got Spain to exempt them from the Inquisition. Morocco was exempt from the Inquisition, as was Jamaica, where they ran another piracy operation, of course, in the Caribbean, which I've talked about on previous shows. They got Spain to exempt that island from the Inquisition as well, so they'd have total freedom to conduct their piracy enterprise, which they used to take down the Spanish Armada. You gotta love it. Jesus Christ, you gotta love it. The very government that they manipulated to give them exemption from the Inquisition is the government that they later took down. Jesus Christ. What a lesson to be learned from that, you other dumbass Jewish supremacist ass-kissing Goyim nations of today. Learn a lesson from Spain. Or just keep kissing their ass and see what's going to wind you up one day, you fools. Anyway, the Netherlands, 1814. 2 years later, 1816, Austria got their curse. 1840, Finland. 1841, Greece. 1846, Portugal. 1850, Belgium. 1856, Spain. 1870, Germany. During the Franco-German War under Bismarck. Poor damn fool. Did he not see what the hell was happening? 1893, Armenia. The same year, 1893, Italy. And then 1907, Switzerland. Anyway, so there you have it. All during that period, there they were busily setting up the central bank so that by the time World War I broke out at their creation, the stage was set to complete the process of getting the nations of Europe in a complete stranglehold. And, of course, the U.S., which got its central bank in 1913. So when Herzl went about making these threats, you better support us or there's going to be trouble, they knew he was capable of following through because they had their goddamn central bank. Provide assistance or we're going to create revolutions. They knew they could do it. They knew they had the funding. They knew they had control of the media. They could easily pull it off. So there were your options. Either support Israel and evade a revolution, or don't support us and risk having done to you what was done to Russia a few years hence. Herzl told a Grand Duke of Baden, for example, that he would diminish revolution. He would distribute revolutionary propaganda in Europe in proportion. Did I word that right? Yeah. He would diminish revolutionary propaganda in Europe in proportion to the support that his territorial ambition received from high authority. In other words, if you support us, we'll diminish revolutionary propaganda. If you don't support us, we're going to beef it up. This is exactly what he did in his little grand tour mission. Son of a bitch, ladies and gentlemen. And again, look what that did for Russia. Russia didn't play the game, and look what it did to them. Just as Theodore Herzl's promises implied, they did stage a revolution there. And they did it through propaganda. Just like Carol Quigley said, they were neutralized through propaganda, Jewish supremacist propaganda, with their control of the media. His belief in the method he used is expressed in his famous phrase, when we sink, we become a revolutionary proletariat. When we rise, there rises the terrible power of our purse. That's pretty much a quote from the Protocols, by the way. In fact, terrible power of our purse specifically is a precise verbatim quote from the Protocols. Although I'd venture to say he wasn't quoting the Protocols was quoting him. But nevertheless, look at the exact same wording here. Isn't that interesting? Oh, but the Protocols is a forgery. No, you're a forgery if you say it's a forgery. Fraud artists. Anyway, there you have it. When we sink, he said, we become a revolutionary proletariat. When we rise, there rises the terrible power of our purse. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, when you view history in light of this kind of psychopathy of these son of a bitches, and you recognize that they've always been the power for the past 3,500 friggin' years behind money, then and only then can you start making sense of major world events. It all falls into place. My. Going back to the goddamn demise of the Bronze Age, for Christ's sakes. Behind that as well. Anyway, in the course of his travels, Herzl, on another occasion, was received by the Kaiser, mounted on a charger, at the very gates of Jerusalem. And the emperor agreed to present to the Sultan Herzl's proposal for a Zionist chartered company in Palestine under German protection. You see, they were first trying this with Germany, hoping Germany was going to play the game and be the minion that was going to bring about the Jewish state. Didn't play out that way, of course, as intended. So look what happened to Germany. They decided to, use England and then later the U.S. as well instead. Later, again, when nothing came of this, Herzl actually threatened the Kaiser with revolution, saying, quote, if our work miscarries, hundreds of thousands of our supporters will at a single bond join the revolutionary parties, threatening him. And of course, what ultimately happened to Germany, as I was just talking about a few minutes back, they staged World War I. Germany became a problem for them. They threatened revolution. Well, they came through with an even greater retaliation than that. They scrapped the revolutionary plan and decided to have an outright war on Germany. World War I and World War II, really, amounted to a war on Germany, didn't it? Of course. In 1933, international Jewry declared war on Germany. But that was only, another phase. They had already done it with World War I. And all because they wouldn't support them en route to the creation of the State of Israel. Well, wouldn't any longer. They initially were. The Kaiser had backed down. Anyway, short break, folks. Right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. So, as part of his tour, Herzl went to Russia, where he was received by the Tsar himself, to whom he spoke in similar terms, barking his threats. About this time, the Third World Zionist Congress was held, and the decision was made that every Jew who became a member of the Zionist club, if you will, had to acknowledge the sovereignty of the still mythical Jewish state. Anyway, next Herzl met with, and speaking of Russia, oh boy, I got some really good shows coming up on the shenanigans these bastards unleashed on the poor people of that country, in this period, well, decades preceding this and then continuing thereafter on up into the revolution. I've talked about the Russian Revolution before, but it's much more important to look at the background of the Russian Revolution to really put it into perspective. So I'll be doing that on a future show. Son of a bitch, when you look at the evils unleashed on society after society by these son of a bitches down through the centuries, folks, their crimes are absolutely monumental, incomprehensibly enormous. Anyway, next, Herzl met with another potentate, the Sultan of Turkey. After this, he then transferred his activities to England, home of the Rothschilds. But that's where his efforts really paid off. Shortly after that, you had your Balfour Declaration bullshit. Anyway, let's look at the real power behind Herzl. The question is, how did Herzl, an obscure journalist from Vienna, receive such a warm welcome from European dignitaries? Very insignificant person. How did he suddenly rise to such prominence? Well, he had that tribal connection, of course. And, again, how did they pay heed to his demands? They knew who he represented, ladies and gentlemen. They knew the power that these bastards had. They knew how their tentacles had been interwoven throughout their societies, especially through their control of their banking system. The media control was bad enough, but that alone, wouldn't have done it. Any government, all it had to do was just just shut down these media outlets. No, that wasn't the real problem. It's that they controlled the banking system. You want to control the government, you have to control its monetary system. Once you have control of that, you don't need control of anything else. It's just going to follow right along. It just so happens, though, that down through the centuries, it's not just the monetary system these son of a bitches have hijacked. Through their control of the financial system, they took control of everything else. That's how it works. Once you've got control of that, that's the first thing you got to do. Once you've got that, everything else just follows. Anyway, Herzl himself did not have any real swaying power of his own. Obviously, kingly portals, his own phrase that he liked to use, kingly portals, would not have opened to him merely because he had called a Zionist Congress meeting of 197 Jewish men at Basel. That alone wouldn't have done it in and of itself. What the European leaders feared, and what leaders around the world still continue to fear today, and have always feared through the past several thousand years, is the power of the Jewish purse, as Theodor Herzl himself said, and as the protocols have stated. Undoubtedly, just prior to his visits with European leaders, they each probably received a telegram from a Rothschild agent informing them of the importance of warmly receiving their ambassador, Mr. Herzl. They were probably prepared, prepped ahead of time. This network of men working in all countries to a common end is the one which must have enabled Herzl to penetrate with his demands to the highest levels of European power. It had to be. Obviously was. Jewish historian Joseph Castine wrote that, quote, the executive setup by the 197 men at Basel was the first embodiment of a real Jewish international. In other words, something that already existed received a visible expression. The Jewish international had always existed behind the scenes. All major leaders knew it. But now he came as their ambassador to represent them, a visible manifestation and representation of that already known to exist behind the scenes string-pulling power. A Jewish international, again, was already in place, and it was powerful enough to command royal, princely, and ministerial audiences for Mr. Herzl everywhere he went. Of course, this should come as no surprise. For such a conspiratorial network as I said, always been at work behind the scenes since the earliest days of Jewish history. This is how they have always worked. They've always served, as advisors to kings. Even in the Jew book, which is, 99% fairy tale. Nevertheless, you got Daniel, for example, serving as an advisor to Nebuchadnezzar. It's a bullshit, fictitious character. But you can bet Daniel represented real-life personages that did exist that were advisors. Just like Joseph, again, probably another fictitious friggin'-ass character. But they did weasel their way into the Egyptian courts. No question about that. I've talked about that before. I'll be doing more shows on that in the future. Quite a few shows. And then, as now, although not in this country, but, in some places they still got to do this, they changed their names so that no one would know who they were. In the Middle Ages, most advisors to kings across Europe were tribe members, but it wasn't, they weren't known to have been. In some cases, it was known that they, quote, used to be, but they were accepted because they would change their name and, seemingly change their religion and become Christians, as though there is a difference. But nevertheless, they would profess to convert to the so-called Gentile religion of Christianity. Oh, make me gag. As Jewish as you can get. But, again, because dumbass Goyim, to this day, for the most part, still haven't figured that out. They think that if a Jew professes to convert to Christianity, that they've given up their Judaism. Oh, Christ almighty. But anyway, so this is the game that's always been played. This is how they've manipulated, or one of the ways, one of the most effective ways down through the centuries, that they have manipulated kings and emperors and, other political leaders, becoming their advisors, or, as was often the case in the Middle Ages, become their physicians. There was scarcely a Jew in the Middle Ages that was, scarcely a physician in the Middle Ages that wasn't a Jew. Or maybe you could word it the other way, too. Scarcely a Jew that wasn't a physician. That was the way